COMBACTE, Combating Bacterial Resistance in Europe. As part of the Innovative Medicines Initiative and the European Federation of Pharmaceutical Industries and Associations New Drugs for Bed Bugs program, the COMBACTE projects were created to meet the challenges of clinical development of antibacterials in response to the worldwide growing challenges of antibiotic resistance. COMBACTE represents an unprecedented partnership between industry, academia, and biotech organizations to combat antibiotic resistance in Europe by tackling the scientific, regulatory, and business challenges that are hampering the development of new antibiotics. One of COMBACTE's projects, and its first, is COMBACTE-NET. This project is dedicated to building clinical, laboratory, and research networks across Europe that will enable more efficient clinical testing of novel antimicrobial drugs. COMBACTE-NET aims to provide a large networks for rapid evaluation of novel treatment strategies, to generate innovative trial designs to facilitate the registration of novel antibacterial agents, and to design and validate tests to support the diagnosis of patients, identify the most appropriate treatments, and monitor the patient's response. COMBACTE-NET consists of 3 solid networks: CLINET, LabNet, and StatNet. Within COMBACTE-NET, 6 clinical trials are now completed, and 4 are currently ongoing. The consortium of COMBACTE-NET has published a total of 43 scientific publications. The objective of CLINET is to set up and maintain a strong clinical hospital network to support new options to treat or prevent bacterial infections in Europe. This network enables CLINET to transparently select the most suitable sites for clinical trials, both in commercial studies and investigator-driven studies, and it supports the execution of clinical trials. In order to get all CLINET investigators trained, CLINET offers good clinical practice trainings. Since the start of COMBACTE in January 2013, the number of hospital sites and member investigators has rapidly increased and has continued to grow in recent years. In 2022, the network contains almost 1,200 hospitals, 3,885 investigator contacts, and 27 national coordinators across 42 countries. Several European countries have a large number of hospitals actively involved in COMBACTE and non-COMBACTE clinical trials supported by CLINET. Although the clinical network is widespread across Europe, the degree of involvement of individual sites can vary. In CLINET, 3 different groups of hospital sites are identified. The first group contains participating sites, 590 sites that are participating in or are selected for 1 or more clinical trials CLINET has supported. The second group contains member sites, 322 sites that have participated in a feasibility or provided data but have not yet been selected for any clinical trial supported by CLINET. The third group contains prospective sites, 279 sites that have expressed interest in being part of the COMBACTE hospital network, but did not yet participate in the feasibility process. CLINET has supported 46 COMBACTE and non-COMBACTE clinical trials. Of these 46 clinical trials, 26 are completed and presented in this overview. Just like the completed clinical trials, the ongoing clinical trials also include specific COVID-19 clinical trials and clinical trials within other consortia. Altogether, over 44,000 subjects have been included. The aim of LabNet is to establish, train, and maintain a high-quality European laboratory network to support drug development through various clinical trials. The role of LabNet in clinical trials is to support site selection, provide scientific expertise, and build a repository. The central laboratory, based at the University of Antwerp, is responsible for providing study materials to the sites biobanking and analyzing study samples and strains. Routine diagnostic laboratories collect and manage samples and strains. They can participate in external quality assessment panel testing and in good clinical practice trainings. Since its launch, LabNet has built and maintained a geographically representative laboratory network through numerous successful collaborations and research projects within and outside of COMBACTE. The network in Europe currently encompasses 872 routine clinical microbiology laboratories and 14 research laboratories with more than 1,300 laboratory contacts in 41 countries. In addition, LabNet has crossed European borders and collaborates with 366 laboratories spread across 33 countries outside Europe. The laboratory network has expertise in 36 studies that enrolled almost 30,000 patients. LabNet was involved both in observational and in interventional studies for different infection types: respiratory tract infections, surgical site infections, Clostridioides difficile infections, urinary tract infections, antimicrobial multidrug resistance infections, arboviral infections, and pediatric infections. From these observational and interventional studies, LabNet has established a repository of specimens and strains consisting of more than 100,000 specimens and 9,000 strains. These samples and isolates can be linked to anonymized patient information. StatNet strives to implement efficient statistical approaches to accelerate antibacterial approval to help those in need as soon as possible and in the best possible way. The main objective of StatNet is to support the implementation of statistical approaches that may yield more effective Phase 2 and 3 randomized clinical trials in support of antibacterial drug development efforts. This has been approached through 3 sub-objectives. Within the first objective, StatNet reinitiated engagement with regulatory agencies about novel trial designs, analysis techniques, clinical outcome definitions to determine and possibly improve acceptability for registrational trials. The second objective was to set up a platform trial to facilitate future implementation of platform trials. In the third objective, StatNet provided epidemiological and statistical expertise to the consortium in order to validate novel trial designs that will help improve the efficiency of randomized clinical trials. For the regulatory interactions, there have been 3 different activities. First, we applied competing events analysis as a primary endpoint for the MicroCare trial to reduce sample size, which was accepted by FDA. Then, novel composite endpoints that were developed for trials in patients with healthcare or ventilator-associated pneumonia were applied to real-world data to check their performance. For this work, a manuscript has been drafted and will soon be submitted. Finally, the Institute of Medical Biometry and Statistics is collaborating with the Biostatistics Working Party to determine the role of estimates in clinical trial design and analysis. As adaptive platform trials are seen as the most promising strategy to make clinical trials more efficient, in COMBACTE-NET, a platform study was set up to facilitate future implementation of platform trials. The Honest Prep study has selected 10 sites where almost 2,000 patients were being recruited. The primary endpoint will evaluate the quality and timeliness of enrollment, while the secondary endpoint focuses on clinical outcomes, including the validation of novel clinical endpoints. This data will also be used to assess the efficacy of different adaptive designs through simulations. For the last objective, post-hoc analyses have been carried out for the EVADE and satellite trials, which included assessment of the impact of confounding, providing more in-depth understanding of time-dependent processes through multi-state models. And finally, risk factors analysis for ventilator-associated pneumonia in colonized patients. COMBACTE-MAGNET focuses on the most vulnerable category of patients, those who are critically ill and being treated in intensive care units. COMBACTE-MAGNET aims to increase our understanding of the needs of these patients and doctors and use that knowledge to advance the development of well-targeted, life-saving treatments. This is done by conducting studies targeting multi-drug-resistant gram-negative bacteria, analyzing data on current microbial threats, treatment and drug-resistant patterns in European countries where ICU patients are most at risk, gathering information on biological markers of Pseudomonas aeruginosa infections, providing a better understanding on why various patients may respond differently to infections, providing researchers with knowledge to design more efficient and effective clinical trials of new molecules and create mathematical models of the infection's effects. In COMBACTE-MAGNET, there are 4 clinical trials, of which 2 are completed. The consortium has published 77 scientific papers. COMBACTE-MAGNET also encompasses one of COMBACTE's networks, EPINET, the epidemiological network. EPINET is a collaboration of experts in epidemiology and surveillance of healthcare-associated infections and antimicrobial resistance. The core objective of EPINET is to develop coherent epidemiology strategies in support of public health actions, drug development priorities related to antimicrobials, and evidence-based generation in the battle against antimicrobial resistance. Major areas of focus of the network include surveillance, antimicrobial stewardship, consensus programs, global, and One Health. At the heart of EPINET lies the Central Data Repository, constructed to map all European surveillance activities and track the geographical distribution and the rate of antimicrobial resistance and healthcare-associated infections, spread of outbreaks, and emergence of resistance. Data is collected biannually and published on the project website. Recently, European antifungal resistant data and clinical studies data from within the COMBACTE consortium were added to the repertoire. As part of the EPINET's consensus program to support the development of common and flexible strategies, an international effort was launched to develop EPINET's 9th consensus-based proposal. This initiative aims to guide reporting of surveillance data of antibiotic resistance and antibiotic consumption from human, animal, and environmental sectors to inform antibiotic policies in the human sector. To facilitate epidemiology data sharing, accelerate site selection for epidemiological studies, and improve patient outcomes, the EPINET Excellence Centers project was conceived. Centers recruitment was launched and membership registration has commenced. EPINET launched the ENSURE study in collaboration with PentaID to pilot implementation of antimicrobial stewardship linked to surveillance data on antimicrobial resistance and consumption in high-risk settings. Recommendation from the EPINET and ArchNet white papers were translated into guidelines that will form the basis of the educational antimicrobial stewardship activities in participating centers. EPINET will utilize its extensive data resources and expertise pool to assess clinical burden of antimicrobial resistance and healthcare-associated infections. This project will be carried out in collaboration with the IMI2 funded project Primavera. In addition, dissemination of results, including the results of a systematic review on European surveillance capacity for tracking antifungal resistance, proof of concept for an online educational tool to limit cross-border spread of antimicrobial resistance, and the One Health consensus proposal will set the tone for the network's activities. COMBACTE-CARE is meeting the challenges of carbapenem-resistant gram-negative bacteria. In time, our current assortment of antibiotics will no longer suffice. COMBACTE-CARE counters that threat by laying the groundwork for tests of new and more effective treatments. COMBACTE-CARE aims to better understand multi-drug resistant bacterial infections such as carbapenem-resistant Enterobacteriaceae, and to support the development of new treatment options. It also aims to analyze observational clinical and epidemiological datasets to inform the design of randomized trials, and to make contributions to the development of a novel treatment options, Astrionam avibactam, for patients with serious gram-negative bacterial infections. Within COMBACTE-CARE, 2 clinical trials are completed and 1 is currently in progress. The consortium of COMBACTE-CARE has published 20 scientific publications. As the networks of COMBACTE have vast potential, especially if pooled with other European programs, an independent post-2021 life was considered for them, resulting in the European Clinical Research Alliance for Infectious Diseases, Ecraid. In January 2022, Ecraid became a legal entity and is now fully operational. This is Ecraid's initial step as it evolves into a self-sustaining, not-for-profit organization conducting clinical research for both public and private sponsors. Ecraid's clinical research network encompasses more than 2,000 sites in over 40 European countries. It includes primary care, hospital and pediatric care settings, clinical laboratories, and long-term care facilities. If you want more information or if you're looking to collaborate with Ecraid, feel free to contact Ecraid or follow them on social media.